Hi, this is Fern, and I would like to welcome you to my Instagram Live. I'm really happy to talk with you today about the Sun and Jupiter cazimi. I'm also going to give an overview of the month of March up until about March 18th, actually, for the next couple of weeks. And we're going to do a card pull just to give an overview from tarot perspective of what's happening right now. And as always, if you have any questions or comments, please feel free to share in the comments section down below. So first up is card pull. And if you all want to take a moment just to focus with me on what might be relevant to everyone who's gathered here now or who's watching this later. And I'm going to pull a card for this time and space. Okay. We've got the Chariot, and I love this deck by Carrie Paris. She uses a lot of old vintage imagery. And this card is very relevant to me, to what's happening both right now and also what I'm going to talk about a little bit tonight. I'm going to be doing a free 15-minute live reading for someone who I'll announce in a little bit. And this person has a lot of Cancer in their chart, actually. And the Chariot card is a card that's ruled by the sign of Cancer. And it has to do with how we feel at home in the world, how we create our own home, our inner sense of home, our own space within ourselves, and how we move forward in the world with that home. The Chariot card has two sphinxes on either side of the Chariot, and this represents the mystery and the paradox of life. To me, that's really relevant with all this Pisces energy that we're in right now. So I'm going to start with the astrology portion by talking about the Sun and Jupiter cazimi, which is exact tomorrow morning, March 5th in the United States, so you can adjust that to whatever time zone you might be joining from. The Sun-Jupiter cazimi is kind of a fancy way of saying a Sun-Jupiter conjunction, which is a way of describing the movement of the planets as they join together. So basically, tomorrow morning, the Sun, which represents our light, our sense of confidence, how we bring our own essence into the world, and how we radiate outward. And so collectively right now, the way that we're all sensing this kind of radiated energy is it through the veil of Pisces. And so as we are moving through this Pisces season, we've now had Jupiter join us. And Jupiter is that planet that brings a sense of growth and expansion. Jupiter brings wisdom. In Greek mythology, Jupiter, or Zeus, is the king of the gods. And so Jupiter has that ability to kind of look over everything and see different perspectives and different information and different wisdom that might be brought into a situation. So every year we have a Sun-Jupiter conjunction, a Sun-Jupiter cazimi, but it takes place in a different sign every year. So last year it was in the sign of Aquarius, and that might be some good archaeological astrology. For those of you who've worked with me before, you know I love to look backwards into the past to find wisdom about the astrology of the moment. So you may want to go back to last year and look and see where the Sun and Jupiter in Aquarius around 8 degrees, what house that fell in your chart, to find some relevance to how that played out for you. This year, with tomorrow's Sun-Jupiter cazimi, Sun-Jupiter conjunction, this represents a rebirth of that Pisces energy, that Pisces flow. This is a chance to begin again in that area of your chart and bring a sense of growth and expansion and magnification. It can bring in new opportunities, new possibilities. But remember with Jupiter that it expands whatever is there. So if there's already been a sense of expansion and growth and Jupiter comes along to magnify it even further, then there can almost be a sense of of too much. You know, if you drink too much, you get a hangover. If you eat too much sugar, you feel kind of sick. So that's kind of the downside of this Jupiter energy. Now, with Jupiter joining the Sun in Pisces, this can open up a floodgate of emotion, of all kinds of feelings, whether it be grief and loss, or anger, or passion, or joy. But Pisces is a water sign, and so when Jupiter's magnifying that water sign, it's going to magnify all of our emotion. So over this next few days with the Sun-Jupiter cazimi, it's really important to make space to just let your emotions flow, to let whatever you're feeling, whatever's coming up for you, to just let it be and to be with it. This can also be a time of great creative inspiration, where the ideas are just coming in, they're flowing in. And so opening up to that, opening up to receive, and really embracing that. I want to pop up a graphic because I'm going to talk just briefly about what it means to have this Sun-Jupiter conjunction in different areas of your chart. So this is going to be through the houses. So if you have Aries rising, for example, the Sun-Jupiter cazimi is going to be taking place in your 12th house. And I'll talk through each house placement, and ideally you would know your rising sign. If you do not know your rising sign, and you don't know how to find out where 15 degrees of Pisces is in your chart, you can take a look. I have a tutorial on my YouTube channel, the link's in my bio, and you can figure out how to find the sign of Pisces on which house it happens to be and which house cusp it's taking place on. So hopefully those of you who are watching now or who are watching later have some sense of what house this is happening in. And here's a graphic just to show you the meaning of those different houses. So if you have Aries rising, this Pisces, Sun-Jupiter in Pisces, cazimi or conjunction is taking place in your 12th house. And the 12th house is the house of magic and mystery and retreat. And so this can really awaken a deep sense of spirituality and mysticism, but also a need to turn within and to take some time out from the real world and feel any feelings that are coming up. And this is going to be a very deep and watery time for people who are having this take place in their 12th house. If you have Taurus rising, then this Sun-Jupiter cazimi is going to be happening in your first house. And so in your first house, this is going to really be, this is going to be happening in your 11th house. I'm going backwards. Okay, so Sun, if you have Taurus rising, Sun-Jupiter is going to be in your 11th house of groups and community and friendships. And this is going to magnify your emotions about how you build community. This is going to possibly magnify your inspiration in that realm. And it's also going to give you some intuition about the future. If you have Gemini rising, this is going to, the Sun-Jupiter cazimi is going to be taking place in your 10th house, which is the house of how you reach your greatest visibility in the world, how you reach a sense of recognition, what your lineage or your legacy might be to the world. So having the Sun-Jupiter cazimi there can expand your recognition in the world, particularly in terms of your sensitivity to the public, how you might be intuitively gathering information about the people you're working with, and also how you might be an inspiration for others. So it can really sensitize you, Pisces style, to the rest of the world and what you have to share with the world. Okay, so we talked a little bit about Aries Rising, we've talked about Taurus Rising, we've talked about Gemini Rising, Cancer Rising. This Sun-Jupiter is going to take place in your 9th house, and this is the house where we find our sense of meaning in life, our philosophy about the world, what brings us a sense of growth and expansion, and how we step outside of our comfort zone. So having the Sun-Jupiter Cazimi in that house is going to bring a sense of mysticism into your belief system. It's going to expand the edges of your boundaries and perhaps bring in or invite in some new belief systems that have a greater sense of sensitivity or vulnerability to them, that allow you to be more emotional and tap into a sense of spirituality that has more of a connection with your more kind of private internal world rather than what you do in the public. If you have Leo rising, then this Sun-Jupiter Cazimi is going to light up your 8th house. And the 8th house is a water house. It's much more internal and private. And having the Sun-Jupiter in Pisces there is really a opportunity to expand how you exchange energy with the spirit realm. There may be a great deal of openness and sensitivity to that right now, so it's always a good time to remember some boundaries, so some filters, so not everything's coming in, but also to kind of tune into how you can be receptive in that way and receive any insight or support, maybe from ancestors, your well ancestors. This is a real opportunity if you have Leo rising for that during this Sun-Jupiter Cazimi conjunction. Okay, if you have Virgo rising, then this Sun-Jupiter conjunction is taking place in your 7th house, which is the house of your mirrors, the house of your opposite. It's the house of relationships in traditional astrology, how you build bridges to people who you want to have in partnership, you want to form a partnership with. So having the Sun-Jupiter conjunction there, it's really going to sensitize you and open you and bring a greater sense of receptivity to the partners who come into your life. And you may feel a greater sense of compassion or be invited to enter into a connection with a partner that evokes creativity and imagination and kindness. Okay, moving along here, we're at Libra. And if you have Libra rising, then the Sun-Jupiter conjunction is going to activate your 6th house, which is the house of service and work, but also the house of how you maintain the rhythms and routines of your life in a way that serves not just other people, but also yourself. So Sun-Jupiter in Pisces here in that 6th house, if you have Libra rising, this is going to really bring in a more intuitive approach to that realm of life, a more compassionate and hopefully kind to yourself approach in how you maintain the routines and structures of your life. So moving on to Scorpio rising, and Scorpio rising is having the Sun-Jupiter conjunction in the 5th house, which is the house of self-expression and creativity. This is the house where the rule of the sun, so this is going to be kind of amplified given that we have the sun in its own house. And so there is a great opportunity here if you have the Sun-Jupiter conjunction in your 5th house to really tap into a deep wellspring of creativity, to really be receptive to expressing yourself in the world in a deep way, in an emotional way. Okay, next up is Sagittarius Rising. And if you have Sagittarius Rising, then the Sun-Jupiter conjunction is going to be activating your 4th house, of home, family, roots, ancestors, and also your deep private self. So there can be an opportunity to dream here, to gather information and insights and creativity through your dreams. If you have Sagittarius Rising and the Sun and Jupiter conjunction is taking place in your 4th house, so tapping into that. And I hope everybody can see the little prompts that are in the houses that I have up here for the graphic, because that can give a little bit further insight. So Capricorn Rising, you're going to have the Sun-Jupiter cazimi in your 3rd house, which is the house of information exchange. It's the house of how we connect to the immediate environment around us. So it rules over siblings and neighbors, also social media, because we spend a lot of time connecting to social media these days, for good or bad. But this house, having the Sun-Jupiter conjunction there, can open you up to your intuition, to how you're giving and receiving information on a very subtle level, and how you might be communicating to others even without words, more from a kind of just, speaking with your more psychic brain and getting your thoughts across from an emotional point of view, more than necessarily a logical perspective. So taking a look at how this might be expanded if you have Capricorn Rising and this is happening in your 3rd house. Aquarius Rising, the Sun-Jupiter conjunction is happening in your 2nd house. So this cazimi effect is taking place in your 2nd house, which is the house of resources. This is the house that has to do with your skills and your gifts and how you might even generate an income. It's also your inner resources, your self-esteem, and how you feel about your gifts, how connected you are to them, how confident you are in them, how you wield them in the world. So having the Sun-Jupiter cazimi in the 2nd house, if you have Aquarius Rising, this is going to amplify your sense of your skills and your gifts. And you may even discover new creative or intuitive gifts that you didn't know that you had before. So this is a really interesting one. Finally, we have Pisces. And Pisces, if you have Pisces Rising, then the Sun-Jupiter cazimi is happening in your 1st house. And this is a house of the self. It's the doorway into you that everybody else walks through to get to you, and the doorway that you walk out of to get to everybody else. So this is going to give you the Sun-Jupiter cazimi in this 1st house of how you dawn onto the world. It's going to give you a whole new perspective on yourself. It may give you a greater sense of confidence. It may make you aware you have emotions that you have that need to be released and processed and moved through. It may really sensitize you just on an energetic or intuitive way, that you may find yourself picking up a lot of information that you weren't aware was necessary with your conscious mind, but that you're taking it in an intuitive way. Okay, so that is a quick kind of go around of all the 12 houses and where the Sun-Jupiter cazimi is taking place in each of the houses. For a more precise look, again, I highly recommend you do a free chart at astro.com if you don't already have your chart, and find out where 15 degrees of Pisces is in your chart to get an indication of where you're having a rebirth of Jupiter, of expansion, growth, wisdom. Where it's almost like there's a very powerful, profound beat of a drum that happens tomorrow that we're all feeling collectively, but in your individual chart, it's going to make an impact as well. So the Pisces floodgates are open. The tears are flowing. The feelings are coming through. There's a great sense of for some people, there's a great sense of loss and grief, of really recognizing what has ended, because we have come to an end of a cycle in Pisces season. This is wrapping up the winter. But there's also a potential for great growth and hope and optimism in our human connection, in our own kind of open-hearted connection that comes from feeling those deep feelings. Before I get into the free reading, I'm going to move through a quick timeline of a few more dates that stand out in March. And I also want to just let you know that the Instagram lives I'm doing are kind of a warm-up for my Wise Stars community that I'm going through a soft launch of right now. And if you're interested in learning more about that, you can go to the link in my Instagram bio or my website. And I want to let you know that if you sign up before April 4th, you get your first month for free. Okay, so some other important dates before we get into that free live reading. The first date after March 5th, and oops, I forgot to talk about Venus and Mars into Aquarius. So that is also happening tomorrow. Tomorrow's a big day. So notice what happens for you tomorrow and how you're participating in life, because besides the Sun, Jupiter, Cazimi, Venus and Mars are finally moving out of Capricorn and into the sign of Aquarius. So over the last several months, as we've had Venus retrograde in Capricorn, and then Mercury retrograde in Capricorn, and then Mars in Capricorn joining Venus, we have been really redefining how we approach relationships from a long-term perspective, how we're committed to our relationships that are important to us, how we can make them more sustainable. We've been redefining, realigning, doing all that kind of reconstruction work of how we show up as our inner adult in our lives, and how we might need to restructure the relationship between our inner adult and that opposite sign of Cancer. And just reflecting back to the card I pulled when we started, the Chariot card, which is represented also by the sign of Cancer and has to do with our relationship to home, our inner home and our external home. So with Venus and Mars in Capricorn, we've been relating to our structures in life. Tomorrow, this all shifts, and Venus and Mars move into Aquarius, and Venus and Mars have moved from earth to air. So there is this sense of things lightening up a bit in relationships, of some new territory being explored, of a sense of exploration and invention and experimentation in the way that we relate to what we love and what we desire, to the way that we make connections with others, with Venus and Aquarius. So we're going to step into this really exciting kind of innovative and intuitive and almost kind of there can be sometimes with Aquarius a sense of a little bit of chaos. So especially when we move into the 0 degrees, which reflects back to December of 2020, when Jupiter and Saturn were at 0 degrees of Aquarius. So whatever was happening for you around that time, this next few days may bring some hints of that back as well. So yeah, tomorrow's an interesting day. Next up, March 11th, when Mercury moves into Pisces. So that Mercury is going to join the Sun in Pisces and also Jupiter and Neptune in Pisces. So we're going to have 4 planets in Pisces on March 11th. And that's going to bring in a greater sense of understanding and perhaps clarity to a sign that is notoriously hard to understand with the logical mind. So we may find ourselves receiving information more through our dreams as Mercury shifts into Pisces on March 11th, through our intuition, through our creative effort. If you're looking for information, if you're looking for ideas or new perspective, rather than approaching it, from up here, try exploring it from here and here, and also, through your feet, through that chakra that's rooted into the earth, because Pisces rules the feet. Finally, the next big date over the next 2 weeks is March 17th, when the full moon is in Virgo. And so we're really going to get an opportunity here before the sun moves into Aries on March 20th to have a sense of awakening and awareness around what needs to be cleaned up, clarified, and purified before we move into that kind of fiery season of action and movement. Okay, so that is 2 weeks of Pisces with a big focus on the Sun-Jupiter Cazimi conjunction that takes place tomorrow, Saturday, in the United States anyway. It's probably at a different time if you're tuning in from somewhere else. And now it is time for the free reading portion. And so I'm just going to shift over to announce the winner of this, which is Julie. And Julie, if you're here right now, can you just type into the comments so I can, if you decide you want to join live, I can pop you up. But if you don't, that's fine too. But I just want to make sure that you are here first. Okay. So I'm going to give Julie a moment to join. And if we don't hear from Julie in a moment, I'm just going to take some questions and then wrap up. Okay, so Julie Hicks was the winner of the free reading. And so I want to just see if she has joined us live before I move forward. Okay. So if anybody has any questions about the Sun-Jupiter Cazimi in Pisces or anything else that I've talked about during this time with Pisces season, we're kind of coming into the wrap-up of Pisces season. It ends March 20th when the sun moves into Aries. I'd be happy to answer those questions now. So, just taking a look here. So we're talking about Sun, Jupiter, Cazimi, which is exact tomorrow. Okay, well, thank you everybody who did join. I'm going to close things up now, and I hope that you have a wonderful day tomorrow. I hope that everything that you are setting intentions for with the Sun, Jupiter, Cazimi, whatever house it's falling in for you, I am wishing you all the best for that. Okay, until I do another Instagram live, I will look forward to seeing you then.